Thank you all for coming out tonight. I know this is probably not the best night, particularly if you're a football fan, because the BCS championship game is tonight. So we've got a little bit of a presentation. The purpose of this meeting is what we refer to as a public input meeting. We've not formulated any regulations or proposals at this time. Every time we go through this cycle, that we're on a 2-year cycle, we have these meetings, we gather public input, we take that public input back, and we start formulating our regulations. With that, I'm going to kick off this presentation. Taylor? How many of you are familiar with the wildlife restoration program, sports fish restoration program? Together, it's referred to what we call WISFR, Wildlife and Sports Fish Restoration Program. All of you, if you hunt fish, you pay into that program. Back in the early 1900s, when wildlife were being decimated across the country because there was actually no field of study for wildlife management at that time, and there were no regulations, no seasons, no bag limits. You pretty much do whatever you want to, and you had market hunting was real big. There was a lot of wanton waste, and that decimated wildlife population. Sportsmen and key conservation groups at that time, particularly the Boone and Crockett Club, came together and they got Congress to pass what's called the Pittman-Robertson Act. That places an excise tax on, and the manufacturer pays it. But of course, the manufacturer pays it, but you can bet it's embedded in the cost that you pay at the retail outlet on sporting arms and ammunition. Some years later, it was amended to include archery equipment. So everything on archery equipment, from the bow string, the arrow shaft, the broad head, the fletchings, the nocks, all of that there's an excise tax in that. And those manufacturers pay that. Doesn't go to Congress. It goes directly, they pay it directly to the Fish and Wildlife Service. Fish and Wildlife Service keeps all that money separately. And then every year, the states are apportioning that money based on 2 factors. One of them's certified hunting licenses. The other one is land area of the state. Now, the land area of our state's not going to change, despite the fact that we do know we have an error in the boundary up there with us in Tennessee, but I don't see that getting fixed. So our area of our state's not going to change. But the number of certified hunting licenses changes and can vary from year to year. A certified hunting license basically is a paid license. So if you get a free license, you don't get counted. We don't get to count you, but you still pay that tax. You go buy ammunition, you're paying that tax. And so that's been one of the struggles for not just our wildlife agency, but other ones. We have legislators and politicians like to give things away for free, whether it's free hunting licenses and all that. That hurts wildlife conservation. We don't get to count those. We don't get to count those licenses. They're not certifiable. So it has to be a paid license. Since the inception of this program, which was back in 1936, Georgia has been apportioned $221 million to go toward wildlife conservation. And if it weren't for this, we would not be able to do what we do. Just the cost of a hunting license is nowhere near enough to pay for all the work that we do. Next one, Taylor. So these public meetings, the purpose is to encourage public participation in the regulatory process, obtain your input for consideration, and also provides an opportunity for an exchange of information between the wildlife agency and our primary customers, the hunters. This process, right now we're at step 1 of this process, January, public input. And these meetings are not the only method for public input. I mean, we know we can only do so many meetings, everybody can't make them. So you can write, if you still like to write letters, you can write letters, send them to us, and submit and comment that way. In this day and age, email has become a very important part. We get lots of emails. I've been getting, I think when I talked to Tina the other day, roughly about 40 emails a day here for about the past week. And you can also call in on telephone. Well, I took a couple of them last week some comments over the telephone. Once these are over, basically from about the latter half of January on through February, our biological staff will be developing hunting regulation proposals. Those will be reviewed by the DNR board in March. At that same time, they will be what we call publicly noticed. They'll be put out for public notice. At that point, you can comment on what we've proposed. In April, we'll have 3 public hearings. We'll have one in the north, one in the mid, one in the south. And that's an opportunity like this to comment on those proposed regs. If you don't want to come to a meeting, you can do that by email, or you can do that in writing or by telephone. In May, the DNR board will take action on those proposed regulations. In June, the month of June, we will develop, or Taylor is the one that mostly does that, will develop that popular guide, the nice little magazine, and then that is usually ready for distribution in late July. Okay? So, regulatory objectives. So how do we go about doing this? First and foremost, regulations are biologically appropriate and scientifically sound. So I like to consider these filters. We get lots of comments, and there's sometimes somebody stands up and they make a comment and I know right away that's not something we're going to do because it's not biologically appropriate or scientifically sound. We'll still going to take their comment. I mean, it's their opinion, it's how they feel. But if things that aren't biologically appropriate or scientifically sound, we're not going to do. We're required by law to manage wildlife and to pass regulations that are biologically sound and scientifically sound. That's the only way it's defensible in court. If we don't do that, we get challenged particularly by anti-hunting type interests or others. It's going to be difficult to win those cases. We also like to try to be responsive to public desires when we can. Minimize negative impact on what's called R3, which is recruitment, retention, and reactivation of hunters. I see one young hunter here that would obviously be a candidate for recruitment. All of you that currently hunt at some point in time may drop out and then may come back. That's called reactivation. And then obviously once we get you hunting, we want to retain you up until the day that the good Lord takes you to his hunting grounds. And we try to strive to keep things simple. Taylor? Some of the current considerations, the things that we've tossed around, we want to toss out to you, and whether you feel one way or another, we want to get your input on it. If things you don't care, that's fine too. Timing of either sex days for deer. Legal hours only, just on the opening day of dove season. Central Georgia bear season, we have a 1-day bear season down there, and we're in the process. We've got a couple straw men for that because we need to make some changes to that 1-day season. And then a variety of WMA changes. All right. Either sex days. So currently where we are, if you're up there in the orange, northeast, the orange and the yellow counties, those counties, according to recent harvest data that we've gotten from the previous season, as well as what we've kind of been seeing and monitoring in Game Check, indicate that things are still tough up there. That if you're a deer, that's a tough place to live these days. Up there in the mountains. So we're not looking or considering any changes to either sex days in the orange and the yellow counties. In the magenta counties, that would be this big belt right through here, includes the agricultural belt. I believe this past 2 seasons that was either sex all season. The deer populations in that area by and large are stable, and we're considering no changes to those counties. In the green counties, which would include a good portion of the Piedmont, let me stop too. Notice there are a couple of these counties that are kind of out here that are these magenta. Those are what we've classified based on human density as urbanizing or urban counties. And according to our deer plan, those counties get either sex all season because of the urbanization issues that are being affected in those counties. But the green counties, which includes the Piedmont and then runs on up into the Ridge and Valley, the deer plan calls to see a slight increase and then stabilize the population in those counties or in those physiographic regions. And based on our data, we've seen a 15.4% decrease in the female harvest in those counties, and as a result of that, that classifies for slight increase. That would result in a slight increase, and so we're going to move to stabilize those. And what we are considering is the current buck-only dates the weekend before Thanksgiving and from January 2nd to the end of the season would become either sex. Therefore, only the first 2 weeks of the firearm season would be buck-only in those counties if we move forward with that proposal that we're considering. And in the blue counties. Got somebody that's very technical in their colors, and it's called that cyan. Those blue counties, that's the lower coastal plain. The deer plan goal for that is to slightly increase and then stabilize. We've seen a 28.7% decrease in doe harvest in those counties, therefore achieving the slightly increased goal. If changed, current buck-only dates for the first 9 days of the deer season would become either sex, except for opening weekend in those counties. Legal hours for opening day of dove season. Doves are a migratory game bird, which means obviously we do have resident doves, but this time of year we get what are doves that are migratory, and they're coming from up in the Midwest and even some up into New England. As a result of that being migratory, the Fish and Wildlife Service is the primary regulatory and management authority over all migratory birds. So ducks, geese, doves, those are most popular that everybody can relate to. And they set frameworks every year, and then the states get to set their seasons within those frameworks. Right now, as far as days go, we maximize out what the Fish and Wildlife Service allows. Fish and Wildlife Service, the federal hours also apply to migratory birds. Federal hours or hunting hours, legal hours on migratory birds are a half hour before sunrise till sunset. As many of you know, if you hunt doves right now, and for as long as I can remember in Georgia, on opening day, dove season doesn't start until 12 noon. I think that goes long-standing tradition that spans way back into, I'd probably really have to say those roots are from a political standpoint. Back when elections were going on, those were the popular things for the candidates to go to and make their cases. And that's kind of been held on to. By Fish and Wildlife frameworks, we could open it up on opening day at a half hour before sunrise. It's not a biological issue. Whether it opens at 12 noon or opens half hour before sunrise is going to be irrelevant to overall dove harvest and what we do for dove management. So it's what we call a social issue. It's really whatever the hunters want to do. So if public desire substantially supports this change, then we'll consider it and move forward. But so if you have a strong feeling one way or the other on it, yeah, we'd be interested to hear that. And hopefully you did take the little short survey that we had specifically on that issue. Central Georgia bear season. It's our smallest bear population. It is somewhat isolated, so it's not as genetically diverse as the mountains or our South Georgia bear population. So there's, relative to it's got a lot more management constraints and management concerns associated with it than our bears in the mountains or our bears down in the south. The one-day season that we have started back in 2011. It was scheduled in November at that time. Females comprised an average of 52% of the harvest during that time. According to our management plan for black bears in the state, our goal is that female harvest not exceed 50% females. So at that time, that was exceeding the goal in our management plan. So we made a change in 2013, and the season timing was adjusted to December in an effort to hopefully reduce the percent females in the harvest. Based on what we knew of their biology at the time, for most black bears, particularly pregnant females, go into den about that time, and if they're in their denning, then they become unavailable to harvest. So we made that change from what we knew about the biology at that time, and but the percent females in the harvest continued to exceed our management goals. From the entire time of the season, females have comprised an average of 57% of the harvest. This is inconsistent with the management goals in the bear management plan, which I mentioned is not to exceed 50%. Additionally, 86% of all females harvested in that one-day sale from Twiggs County. Average age of female bears in the harvest is 5.7, and this is a good thing because we want the females that are being harvested to be older. An important thing about bears, they're not like deer and they're not like rabbits. They're not like most wildlife species that come to sexual maturity at a very young age generally. They breed frequently and they have lots of offspring. Bears aren't like that. They don't reach sexual maturity until they're older, 3.5, 4.5 years of age, and then those females are not going to breed every year. They're breeding every other second or third year, so very infrequent. They only have 1 or 2 cubs. You know, mortality at times can be a challenge on those cubs, so that makes it a little bit more of a challenge, a little bit more complicated to manage bears than most other wildlife species. But with that age where it is, that's consistent with our plan. We like to see that, but we've got to do something to address the percent females in the harvest. It is a biological issue, and we intend to address it in this regulation cycle. And to do that, we've got a couple of potential ideas based in that biology that we can do to address that. One of those is move the timing of that one-day hunt to the second Saturday in January. We've been have some research projects on that bear population now ongoing for, I guess, probably about 8 years, 9 years now. We've learned a lot more about that bear population. One thing we've learned is it's not as genetically diverse as the other two. We've also learned that those females actually don't go into the den until much later. Based on the information we've had from the radio-collared females in that area, it's that second Saturday in January is one that most of the females, particularly those that have been bred, are going to be unavailable to harvest. Another option would be to maintain the current timing of that season as we have it, but hold the hunt every other year. Another option is to maintain the timing of the second Saturday in December, but close Twiggs County, and we can open Bleckley County. I mentioned that 86% of all the females that have been harvested in Twiggs County. So it clearly makes sense. If you close Twiggs County, we pretty much cut out most of the harvest of the females. Obviously, the folks that hunt in that county and interested in hunting bears may not like that. And in Bleckley County, we know that we get a lot of males that go to Bleckley County during the fall of the year. This would open that up and allow some of those males to be removed. And another option would be move the timing of the one-day hunt to the second Saturday in January, and also add Bleckley County to the mix of the counties there where that's allowed. WMA consideration. These typically change in response to biological parameters specific to each wildlife management area, whether that's what we're seeing in deer data-wise, what our deer camera surveys are showing, or any of the other data that we collect, whether it's turkey harvest, our bear baits in the mountains. We run bait stations on bears every spring. We've been doing that for over 30 years, monitor those. In addition, calendar shifts back and forth every day. So things that are like, always like the third weekend of November, the actual dates change because the calendar shifts. So we have to make those changes. And at times we look at broader issues. Some of the broader issues that are under consideration that we've kind of thrown out there is allowing the use of suppressed firearms for hunting on WMAs. As y'all know, may or may not know, the legislature made some changes to, big gun bill here a few years ago, and one of those was in law prior to that. It was unlawful anywhere in the state to hunt with a suppressed firearm. Interestingly, the law says silenced, but we know that there's no such thing. Those are suppressors. When that was done, we didn't make that change on WMAs at the time. We kind of wanted to fill out and figure out how our hunters felt about that, particularly those that hunt on WMAs. Allowing the use of buckshot is provided in state law. In state law on private lands, you can hunt deer, bear, barrel hog with buckshot. On WMAs, you can't. I've been working for the agency for over 20 years, and when I came here, I kind of wondered why that was. I asked around some of the older biologists at the time, never really got an answer that made a lot of sense to me. Well, it's not as safe, or this and that. And, tell us how you feel one way or the other, if you're interested in that. Timing and structure of WMA managed hunts. If you hunt WMAs, you know how, the timing, and we have structures maybe like either sex last 2 days on deer hunts, how the timing goes if you're interested in some of that. Even if it's just for a specific WMA, we'd like to hear that. Opportunities to expand small game hunting on our WMAs, And we're always open to other suggestions or whatever input you have. You may have something that's not even on any of these slides, and certainly encouraged to bring that up and share that with us. All right, that concludes the presentation. At this point, we'll have really the official part of this meeting, which is to accept your public comment. Please hold any questions you have until the end of the meeting. We generally, if you've been to these before, know that we hang around and try to answer questions. We also know that some folks aren't comfortable asking questions in front of a crowd, and so if you're one of those, you feel free to come to any one of us and pull us aside, and we'll do the best we can to try to answer your question. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Kevin and I will be up here trying to record your summarized comments. I know what I mean by that is sometimes folks get up and they'll talk for 2 minutes about their own experiences, when really what they want to say is they want to see less either sex days, or they want to see more, or they want to see a lower bag limit. And those are the things that we're going to try to capture. What I'll do is I'll first sit down. When you signed in, there was a box you could check that said yes, you wanted to make a comment. So I'll sit down, I'll go through that list of people who marked yes, and I'll call your name. When I call your name, stand up, provide us your comment, try to keep it within about 3 minutes. Once we get through that list, sometimes folks don't mark yes, they mark no, and then after they sit and listen to folks, then while they're out there decide they want to make a comment. So at the end of that, I'll ask, is there anybody else that would like to make a comment? Just raise your hand, kind of hold it up. We'll get through everybody. Once we get through all the folks that want to make a comment, that'll close the meeting, and we'll remain to entertain any questions you may have.